Morning, John.
Morning.
John Paff.
Right.
Okay. And you hold an office with the Libertarian Party. Now, before we get too far, can I introduce your son too?
Sure.
Okay. This is Alex.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. Okay. Now, tell me about your history with the Libertarian Party in New Jersey.
Yeah, I think I joined the party back in about 1989, 90, something along those lines. And I got pretty active pretty quick. And I just embraced the philosophy that it just seemed to me that there was too much regulation, too much government, too many taxes. It seemed like, to me, the government was more of a problem than it was an actual, a benefit for people in a lot of respects. And I decided somewhat early on that one of the problems was that we didn't know what government did to a large degree. We knew what government said it did, because government will issue press releases. If the police officer saves a baby, they're going to issue a press release, and that's fine, and that's good. But if a police officer, let's say they settle a lawsuit for $100,000 for a beating, an excessive force lawsuit, they won't issue a press release on that.
Well, let's get into that in a minute. I want to get into, you hold a position within that organization.
Yeah.
I want to know how that came about.
Okay, well, that's the Open Government Advocacy Project. So that's what I'm saying is that the idea is, I just use that as an example, that I found that what government does and what it says it does, there's a big disconnect. And I think that if I try to get underneath the blankets, I try to get behind the curtain to see all the things that government does, the stuff that they don't want you. And there's also a large part of what happens that the people in government don't want you to know, and they try to actively suppress that information. In order for people to have a fair picture of what government is, they have to know what it does, all of what it does, the good and the bad, and then they can judge for themselves whether they think we need more of it or less of it. So out of all of this, and I went through a lot of fits and starts, and I've had several projects where I've seen government programs that don't operate well, or that are not transparent at all to the public. One of them being the attorney discipline process in New Jersey. That's one. So for several years I maintained a website that revealed as much as possible all the information about the attorney discipline. That the attorneys they let go with a slap on the wrist, the ones that maybe they ganged up on, so people could get a better idea of how this thing actually works, or maybe that they could draw a conclusion that it doesn't work. So through all that, I found there was a common theme. That what I said before is that the government doesn't always tell you what's going on, and that it's important for people to know. So we founded the Open Government Advocacy Task Force, the project. And what I do is I go around to municipalities. I try to uncover the things that municipalities and school boards would rather not reveal. And some of those things are the things that are held up in their executive session minutes, the things that they talk about in closed non-public session. Some of them are the lawsuits they settle. And there's a whole bunch of things that they don't tell you. And some of them is the financial disclosure statements, that there's many of them that don't file. The fact that there is no enforcement, really, whenever they do violate any of these laws. And to try to highlight for people that there's a lot of stuff that goes on that is that's secret, and it takes a lot of work to dig it out, and there's a lot of people that are not being held to any level of accountability within government. And that's essentially what it tries to do, and that's what essentially my job with the Libertarian Party is to expose that kind of a thing.
And what's the title that you hold?
Well, actually I have three. One of them is, I'm chair of three task force. One is the Open Government Advocacy Project. That deals with meeting minutes, transparency in local government, and the civil settlements that are entered into. Two is the Preempted Ordinance Repeal Project, which deals with towns that still have on the books outmoded and still enforcing ordinance that have been declared illegal by the courts for maybe 30 years. And the other one is a new one called the Police Accountability Project, where we try to hold police officers accountable whenever we find that there's a lot of times they're conducting illegal searches. They don't get warrants when they're supposed to. They violate someone's rights. Usually this all has to do with the drug war, enforcing the prohibition on drugs. And what they do is they violate people's rights. The person then gets off because it was an illegal search, and all that money and time was wasted.
Well,
because they didn't. So
even that sounds like an advocacy project, because certainly you don't have the authority to hold them to account?
Well, I can file an internal affairs complaint, which is what I do. And then the internal affairs complaint, then we get to see that's another system that's extremely secret and secretive, and it's very hard for a member of the public to know whether it is a real system.
And it varies from town to town.
And it varies from town to town, and some towns ignore internal affairs complaints, even though they're required to respond.
Mm-hmm.
Some towns are hostile toward internal affairs complaints, which I just found in one town. Other towns are very dutiful, and they actually really investigate and come up with a fair result. So it's a way of understanding, by most people would file maybe one internal affairs complaint in their entire life. If I file 25 or 30 internal affairs complaints, by getting the responses or non-responses, I'm able to get a better idea as to how well the system is actually processing these complaints.
Now, there's a question of standing. How do you achieve that in...
Well, internal affairs complaints, there is no standing requirement. Internal affairs complaints say that even anonymous complaints are accepted. The Attorney General's guidelines are very clear on that. So if you were to send an anonymous complaint to your police department, they have to investigate it. So if an anonymous complaint is accepted, then one from a person that lives out of town should also be accepted.
Okay. How does it come to your attention?
I usually read, I study, I spend quite a bit of time reading court cases and visiting and looking at court dockets and finding out what's happening in the courts. And I'll run across cases that are, or sometimes people direct me to cases where police were a conviction was thrown out.
Well, I think that's part of what, as far as having people direct you to cases. I mean, the way that I found out about you is you went on the Bayonne forum of NJ.com and you announced this thing that happened in Bayonne. Also, you're in touch with a reporter there for the Jersey Journal, Mike Conti. But it seemed to me that you were looking for people to reach out to you.
I did. That's precisely correct. I mean, it's very easy to find me. If you Google my name, if you can find me. It's not hard to find me. And I want to hear from people, and I do receive anonymous reports. Some people are, and that's another thing. People are very afraid. People have contacted me.
It's anonymous to you?
Anonymous
like
to me.
You don't know
I have no
who,
idea,
okay.
nor do I want to know.
Okay.
They will send me, usually it's an anonymous email from some blind Gmail account or something along those lines.
I would think confidential maybe, but not in the sense that you would know who they were, but wouldn't.
I do not know who they are.
Okay.
People will send me things, and what I will do is, I mean, some anonymous stuff not has no merit. But if someone identifies a court case with a docket number and says this was a settlement and this is horrible and nobody knows about it, I mean, I can very easily look up the court case and find out that it exists and then do further exploration. But essentially, what I say is that people tell me where the bodies are buried, and I go dig them up.
There's a couple of different systems for looking up the case.
Right.
If it's federal is different than the state, right? As far as
it's
looking
similar, it's just a different system. It's called the PACER system in the federal.
Right.
And you can look up. It's a pretty good system for a government computer system. You can
and cheap too. It's like
it's 8 cents a page.
Right.
And you can Oprah the same documents for 5 cents a page if you know they exist.
Okay.
From the municipality. So in other words, if Bayonne is sued for, and let's say there's a 40-page complaint that they're going to charge you 8 cents a page. Well, not that it's a big deal. You could go to Bayonne and say, I would like a copy of the same lawsuit, because they obviously had it, but it cost them 5 cents a page. So I mean, sometimes I will do that because cost is a consideration. I'm self-funded.
Sure. And that's you're also looking for donations for the purpose of.
I'm mainly looking for donations of help. Of assistance. I mean, what I'm doing here is, admittedly, is haphazard compared to what needs to be done. We have, 567 municipalities, more school boards than that, counties, state agencies, all of them getting sued and suing people and being involved in all these types of things. What's needed is is more people. I'm doing this as best as I can as one individual with a small group of people that help. But
it occurs to me you're by no means trying to catch everything either.
I'm trying to catch what I can.
You peruse, and then whatever catches your eye as a possibility, that's where you'll.
And I try to be systematic about it to the extent that I can, and I try to be fair as far as going after. I mean, I will look at towns that are controlled by Democrats. I'll look at ones that are controlled by Republicans. This has nothing to do with party affiliation. This isn't something I get accused of that. Somebody says, well, you're just a plant for the Republicans trying to get the Democrats. No, I go to Republican towns, go to Republican and Democratic towns, and I try to go all around the state and hit all the counties.
How? You physically go to the...
No, sometimes I do. Like I went to a Denelvin Borough Council meeting in Middlesex County. It's close by. I've traveled. I do go down to South Jersey occasionally.
I'm trying to get to the basics of it, though. You have, 21 counties in New Jersey, and they each have their own superior court.
Yeah.
Is there a central place where you
As
look?
far as court records go,
As
yes,
far as looking at it.
you can get it on the internet. There's the ACMS, the Automated Case Management System. You can get the court cases right online.
Okay.
You can at least do basic searches. Then once you find a case, unlike the PACER system, the federal case, you have to actually either go to the county courthouse where the case resides, or else you have to send in a records request to that county courthouse. Or
Well,
to the
and then
municipality.
when you're on ACM, what are you looking for? How does it?
Well, I can look for things. I can put in. The ACMS is a difficult system. You would think that you would be able to sort by things like whistleblower suits and just sort and filter, but they have no capability for that. Even though they have a 3-digit code that corresponds to.
But I guess you're looking for something in the case name, something versus
exactly the case name.
versus the department. of
You
this
might
or
find
versus
that
the
like something like I want to see a case of I might go township of and put that in there in Burlington County and find out how many cases are from name township of East Hampton, township of Burlington, and then you start looking at the cases. It's a lot of work, and it would be a lot easier if the state of New Jersey had a better computer system. But this is what we've got. It's an antiquated system, so that's what we do.
Do you focus on the civil cases?
The civil cases, yeah, mostly the civil cases. I mean, that's where the settlements occur from. The settlements arise out of civil cases. The criminal cases, I look at those sometimes mainly to find out about police accountability.
All right. Now, I'm from Bayonne, and this article that caught my eye was from Bayonne. And you talk about lack of transparency or the information they should put out. Now, obviously, the information you got is public information.
Right.
Okay, that's one of the regulations that they have to, if somebody requests it, they have to be able to get it. And in fact, in this particular case, it was a federal case, so it's very easy to get.
Roughly, yeah.
But part of your mission appears to be that every time they settle a case like this, you want them to do a press release on that.
I want them to report it, at least to make it easy. I mean, what basically typically...
Certainly it's reported within the court, right?
Well, it's reported, but I mean, it's theoretically public. I mean, you have to know what you're looking for, and it takes a certain amount of time and effort that most citizens, and even most citizens, are not willing to undergo. That they want to see, they want things to be shown to them. Most people don't have an hour or two. They say, well, I want to devote 3 hours this week to looking at Bayonne's court filings to see if anything's up. I mean, that's not what most people do, and I understand that. What typically happens is that an event happens in 2005. The lawsuit is filed in 2007, usually a couple days before the 2-year statute of limitations runs out. And then the settlement happens in 2009 or 2010. So there's a period of 5 years sometimes, not typically 5 years, between the actual event, the lawsuit's filing, and the actual settlement. Now, up until Asbury Park press case, which I was a plaintiff in, against the county of Monmouth, the settlement agreements were not always public. The towns would deny you, because they felt that they put confidentiality agreements within the settlement agreements. They would say, nobody can talk about this. Mm-hmm. Our case, which went to the Supreme Court, showed that, no, they're public. Now, since then, it's gotten a lot easier, so I'm able to Oprah the settlement agreements, and then I get them. Also, it's difficult to find out. I mean, I have a roster of 50 or 100 lawsuits that I have to go over once a month. I mean, nobody notifies me when the lawsuits settle. Mm-hmm. I have to check each one every month to see if it has settled. So a lot of times what happens is there's like the newspaper reporters, they do what they can, but they're being cut and they're being assigned more towns, they're being overworked, and a lot of times they put new people in that don't have the background or experience. So if something happened in 2007, they hire a new reporter in 2009, he doesn't even know that the thing happened in 2007. So what I do is, when I get the information, I put it online and I send it. I seek out the press. Mm-hmm. I try to get it printed because I think it's important for people to know. Let them publish it. And the newspapers typically find these things interesting.
Well, let me try to disagree with some of your assumptions.
Okay.
And it's specifically regarding Bayonne. They have a website, bayonnenj.org.
Okay.
There's several aspects to it, mayor's office, city council, whatever. Under the city council, they'll have a link that says meeting agendas. And